watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
She's the Republican running for Attorney General here in Illinois, the big election coming up in November. Her name is Erika Harold, and she joins us now. It's good to have you back with us.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
First time since the primary.
It is.
You won that race. Now the eyes are on November.
Indeed.
A big week in politics.
The big race is on.
And it was a big week for the law, Constitution,
Absolutely.
and politics with what
Supreme
happened.
Court junkies had a fantastic week.
I'm sure you saw a fantastic week. In your words, there was a lot of new opinions there with Justice Anthony Kennedy stepping down. He's the only conservative appointed justice who has voted to uphold Roe versus Wade. We saw Governor Rauner sign HB 40 last year, which removed that trigger provision, putting up a blockade preventing, or protecting rather, access to abortion in Illinois should Roe v. Wade be overturned. Is this another area of disagreement that you have with the governor, this issue of abortion?
My focus is enforcing the law, whatever it is, as I'm Attorney General. And I think it's important in a position like this that you're not bringing your own personal views into it in terms of enforcing the law. And so on issues of constitutional interpretation, as Attorney General, I will take what is the Supreme Court's latest precedent and make sure to uphold that, because that's what I'm sworn to do.
So let's play that out. If President Trump does what he's promised and appoints a pro-life justice to the bench, and as some legal analysts have suggested, perhaps in a while, some states, not Illinois, but other states may be able to overturn or ban abortion, or by overturning Roe versus Wade, they may be able to make abortion illegal in those states. What impact would that have here in Illinois?
It depends on what the lawmakers in the General Assembly do, and whatever law they pass, I would be sworn to uphold that, and that would be what I would do.
All right, so you're also running a campaign. You want Republicans and independents and Democrats, but primarily
I want everyone to vote for me.
You're running as a Republican, and a lot of Republicans in this state have been disheartened by Governor Rauner's positions on this issue of abortion. What are you giving them to vote for, if anything? Is there a pro-life pledge? What do voters need to know about you on the issue of abortion when you're running for this position?
The issue that people talk to me most about, Republicans, is fighting corruption and standing up against the Madigan machine.
Are you dodge? That's a dodge. Are you saying?
It's not a dodge. The job of Attorney General is to enforce the law, and that's not the issue that people talk to me about on the campaign trail. It may be the issue that people talk to members of the General Assembly about, but people want the Attorney General to enforce the rule of law. And so I make it clear that I'm not going to be running on a host of issues that have nothing to do with the job that I'm seeking. And the General Assembly will do what it does, but I am committed to enforcing the rule of law. So voters, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, they care most as it relates to the Attorney General's position. They care about corruption, they care about term limits, they care about fair maps, they care about somebody making sure that the political class is not advantaged over ordinary Illinoisans. And that's why I've been able to galvanize so much support.
So just to circle back, on this issue of abortion, you don't really have a message to Republicans right now that it's not something that you're going to be talking about in your campaign?
The message is focused on enforcing the law, because that's what the job I'm seeking. People know that I'm pro-life. That's not something that is a secret to anyone. But what people also know is I uphold constitutional principles, and I understand the job that I'm seeking.
In a previous run for Congress, you mentioned that even in cases of rape and incest, which most Republicans carve those out, but that you were still opposed to abortion. Have your views at all evolved or changed on that particular issue?
My views are clear. I will uphold Illinois law, and that's what's important for voters to know about this.
Let's talk about your race. You've got a bit of a nasty fight already going with Senator Raoul. There was a attack ad that their campaign put out.
She is quoted as saying at a beauty pageant.
Harold was asked if you had to place a child in foster care, and the choices were either A, a loving gay couple, or B, a heterosexual couple who were known child abusers, who would you choose?
Harold reportedly stated she would choose to place a child in an abusive heterosexual home.
One of the pageant officials tells us her answer stopped the room.
So we saw a bit of that ad there. Your rival is running this ad on digital, not on the airwaves. Do you recall that moment, that question?
I don't recall that specific exchange, and that's something that I've been very clear about. I don't recall it, but what I also have made clear is that if I said it, it was absolutely wrong, and I've also made clear my position today, which is I support the right of same-sex couples to be able to adopt and foster parent.
So when your rival uses this, I mean, your position now is that you support that same-sex couples being able to adopt kids.
Absolutely.
It seems like a memorable moment, though, that you're saying you don't have any memory of it.
I'm saying I don't remember that. I don't remember that specific exchange. And we are talking about something that happened almost 20 years ago. Almost 20 years ago when I was a college student. And if everyone thought back upon everything that people allege they may or may not have said 20 years ago when they were college students, I think most people would be hard-pressed to be able to remember that.
What was your first reaction? This was the first ad, and it often tells us where a race is headed.
I thought that it was very surprising that he would be running his first ad that would be so negative in June. So what that told me is he's very concerned about his own prospects for electoral success. It also told me that he's not particularly proud of his own record, or else he would be touting that. I would also say when I saw the ad, I thought it was hypocritical because Senator Raoul, during the course of debating various issues on the floor of the Senate, talked about how his own views had evolved. He specifically said that he himself used to discriminate against people based on the basis of sexual orientation, but that he had evolved, and he was glad to see that. I am glad to see that people evolve, and I think it's disappointing that he would use a different standard to judge me than he would want others to judge himself.
Interesting. So you're saying he said
during the context of debating the issue of same-sex marriage and civil unions in Illinois, he talked about his own personal evolution, which I think is consistent with many Americans' evolution. He said that he had discriminated against people on the basis of sexual orientation, but that he had evolved. I'm happy that he evolved, but I think it's disingenuous and hypocritical for him to run an ad suggesting that somehow that's my current position when I've made it clear it's not. If he can evolve, so can I, and all Illinoisans should be glad that we're in a place that people do evolve.
That's very interesting. You've talked a lot about public corruption, and also when the recent Me Too scandal and Speaker Mike Madigan's operation has come under fire. There's a new leg to this story almost every week. And the most recent iteration, I want to get your response to this, but his chief of staff, Mike Mapes, has been fired or shown the door after a laundry list of allegations about sexual harassment or turning a deaf ear to complaints about sexual harassment that were filed with him, and then they left to die on the vine, these allegations. He is now set to reap a windfall of some $130,000, I believe, in back pay of days that, sick days, vacation days he did not use. Attorneys general will often file or support or sponsor or help to pass legislation. Is this something that you would go after in cases of sexual harassment when people are dismissed on the basis of something like this? Should they be entitled to all that back pay?
They should not. I think people who are terminated as a result of misconduct should not be able to reap financial rewards for their time in the workplace when they created a hostile environment for others within the workforce.
It's very interesting. So what else? The Legislative Inspector General now is able to investigate cases of sexual harassment or allegations that are filed against lawmakers without first getting a green light from the leader of that chamber. But is there anything else left that needs to be done to repair this process?
Absolutely. And the fact that people think it's a big win that the Inspector General doesn't have to get the legislature's commission before acting on a complaint is very sad and shows how much progress really needs to be made in the state of Illinois. Because although they don't have to get the permission of the Ethics Commission, which is comprised of legislatures, before investigating, they still have to get the permission of legislatures to issue subpoenas. And it's still the Ethics Commission that's comprised of legislators that will be adjudicating any complaint that's brought.
So what's the fix?
So the fix is this. We need an independent process where the Ethics Commission is not comprised solely of legislators. There need to actually be citizens, members of the public that are on that board. And instead of the complaint being adjudicated by the Ethics Commission, it needs to actually be adjudicated in a fair and thorough way by the independent Illinois Courts Commission, because that's how allegations of judicial misconduct are adjudicated. You need to have people who are independent from the process, who are actually the ones evaluating it.
I'm going to talk about Janus versus AFSCME. It was a big Supreme Court ruling this week, and during the arguments phase, Attorney General Lisa Madigan was defending AFSCME, and she was opposing Governor Rauner in this ruling. Now the Supreme Court has made their decision. But there still remains a big question that the Attorney General's office remains very involved with, which is this collective bargaining process. Under this new construct where members can now opt out of union membership, what happens to collective bargaining? If you're Attorney General, who negotiates the rate of pay for members who are for state employees who are no longer members of that union?
The way I understand the impact of Janus, that the collective bargaining won't change. It still covers all of the people who are employed. The change that Janus brought about is that people who choose not to join the union no longer have to pay agency fees in support of advocacy that they may not agree with.
But the unions say they should not have to provide benefits or negotiate benefits on behalf of members who don't pay them for those services.
If they don't want to be responsible for bargaining on behalf of people who aren't joining their union, I mean, that's a change in the law that they could seek to initiate. Janus simply said that people have the right to join unions, but people who choose not to join unions should not have to pay for services that they don't think are of benefit to them. I am the person who has a history of standing up and being a fighter as it relates to the average person and standing up against entrenched interests, and my opponent has not. When people identify what's wrong with this state, they look at someone like Speaker Madigan, who's had a stronghold of power and has used it to quash reforms. My opponent has no record of standing up against him, no record of standing up against Joe Barrios, no record of standing up and fighting for the things that matter. People want someone who's going to fight for their interests, and my messaging during the course of this campaign is going to show the people of Illinois I'm the person who will fight for them. My opponent is not.
All right, Republican Erika Harold running for Attorney General, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Big race ahead. Stick with us.